Hi guys, we're starting out with your first chapter in Anatomy and Physiology dealing with Introduction to A&P. If you've got the newest edition of your A&P book, which is the Understanding Anatomy and Physiology, it's your second edition of your Thompson. If you'll turn to the very first chapter, we're looking at page 4 and 5. You can start looking there and follow along. Okay, just the definitions of anatomy and physiology, the study and the structure of the body. Anatomy, physiology is how it works. So we're going to look at those both simultaneously as we're going through this lecture. Your body is arranged in a hierarchy, and that's how your book is even arranged. So we'll start out with very simple, small, and then work up to very complex. So you're going from things such as atoms, building up to molecules, molecules coming together as organelles. Then we're creating a cell, moving to tissue, organs. Then we put several organs together to produce an organ system. And then you have us, the organism. So, looking at that, if you've read your chapter already, you should know the smallest living unit that makes up the body structure are called what? What's the smallest living unit within us? A, molecules, B, organelles, C, atoms, or D, cells. Key is living units, the smallest living units. So you're looking at D, cells. Yes, atoms are part of us, and they're the smallest out of all of these things, but they're not living. So when we get to cells, we have a living structure. Body systems, we have 11 organ systems, and again, if you're looking in your book on page 5 and 6, you definitely want to read what's in those organ systems. So on page 5 and 6, read all of these. You will see them on a test. It'll be something as simple as the integumentary system contains what parts of the body? That would be skin, hair, nails. That would be all integumentary. Question may be something like, what regulates fluid balance or blood volume? That would be the urinary system. So make sure you read those boxes. But we do have 11 of them making up our whole system. And there may be some organs that play a part in a couple of different systems. Which organ system supplies the body with immune cells? So which one of those 11 is considered our immune system? We have the integumentary system, B with the lymphatic system, C, endocrine system, and D, the nervous system. So which one of those are considered our immune system? That would be B, your lymphatic system. Here we're looking at the different types of cavities that we have. One, you're going to have to learn your med terms. We may not have covered these med terms yet in medical terminology, but you're going to have to learn them now. So, one, your ventral side is going to be this front side. It's going to be called ventral. You can also call it anterior, but we're going to call this ventral. And then the back side is our dorsal. So think of me like a big shark with a dorsal fin on my back. If I had a dorsal fin back here, just like a shark on their back. It's the back side. So within the ventral cavity, the front side, we have two other subdivisions of that cavity. So you have the top part, your thoracic. Your thoracic is up here in the chest. It's going to contain your lungs and your heart. Now, it's got a division here, and this divider is a big muscle called the diaphragm. It divides the thoracic and the abdominal cavities. Your abdominal cavity, that's going to include all the abdominal organs, so stomach, intestines, liver, pancreas, as well as your gallbladder, your appendix, your spleen. Those are all your abdominal organs found in that abdominal cavity. You'll notice that I didn't mention the kidneys or the bladder. They're kind of special, especially the kidneys. They lie back behind this cavity, and it's called retroperitoneal. So kidneys lie back behind there, and then you'll find the bladder down here in the pelvic cavity. So not the abdominal cavity, but the pelvic cavity. So you'll have bladder, and if you're a female, then you'll have reproductive organs in that pelvic cavity. Uterus, ovaries, those things. The back side, we have the dorsal cavity. Very top, you don't necessarily think of your head back behind, but it is kind of, because we have all these facial bones, so it is setting a little posterior. So cranial cavity obviously is holding your cranium, and inside it we have our brain, and some of our spinal cord. So brain stem here, brain. This is also considered a cavity, our spinal cavity, which houses our spinal cord with its spinal fluid. That's it on that one. Still looking at your cavities. So remember, this would be considered all of this in the category of your thoracic, not your thoracic, but your ventral cavity, the front side. So this would include your thoracic and your abdominal cavities. We're just looking at it face on now. In this thoracic cavity, you have what's called a pleural cavity. We're going to talk in depth about the pleural cavity because it has two membranes, and these are very important for breathing and reducing friction and things, and reducing the lungs from collapsing down like they naturally want to do. So we'll talk about that stuff later on in the pulmonary system. So in the pleural cavity, we have a pleural set of organs, and those are your lungs. So pleural cavity, we have lungs. Here in the middle, we have your mediastinum. So if you think sternum, we call it sternum here. So sternum here, back behind it, you have your heart, and that whole cavity or space is called your mediastinum. We also have a sac around the heart that's called a pericardial sac even. Again, you see that muscle that's dividing the thoracic and the abdominal cavity, that diaphragm. We get into abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity. All found in that abdominopelvic cavity. So if you combine the two, it's abdominal pelvic. So the heart is located where? It is in a ventral cavity, but to be more specific, is it the mediastinum, the pleural cavity, or the dorsal cavity? So if you had said B, the mediastinum, you're correct. So ventral cavity, front side, where we do have the mediastinum, pleural cavities on the sides of the heart with the lungs in them. And then a dorsal cavity would be backside. Remember, brain and spinal cord. You do want to know these abdominal regions. This comes in handy when you're describing pain, areas of pain. So if you're looking on page 11 in your book, you can see the different regions. So you've got 9 different regions. So if you're looking at right hypochondriac region, epigastric, so epi meaning high or above. Remember, you did have that one in med-term. Epi, high above the gastrics, gastruc, the stomach. And then you have your left hypochondriac area. Then if you go to the middle, you're going to have your umbilical region. So if you think about umbilical cord, where the belly button is, or sometimes we call it umbilicus. So your umbilical region. On the right side, you'll have your lumbar region. When we get into learning bones, you'll know this is your lumbar vertebrae. So that would make sense for this to be the lumbar because it's in this section here. So right lumbar region, left lumbar region. Then you'll have a right iliac region. And so your pelvis here is actually we call the ilium or iliac. So it's the pelvis, right iliac region. Then we have our hypogastric. So if you're thinking stomach here, this would be epi and this would be hypo below. And then you'll have your left iliac region. Those are the 9 regions. Again, You can look in your book. I like this diagram because you can it's transparent and you can see back behind what organs are within this region. So if someone was having epigastric pain, then they're probably having stomach pain. If someone is having right lower pain here, so your right iliac region, that would be the appendix, because that's where it's found. So that's what we like, knowing what these regions are, so when you document. When your patient says, I have pain right here, well, then you can document that as right iliac region, and the nurse or the physician knows exactly where you're talking about. You're talking about right here. We've got a more broader looking diagram. Nurses use this a lot. So you have right upper quadrant, so right here, right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant. So it's just cut into fours. We like to listen to vowel sounds in all these regions. The nurses do when they're doing an assessment. And you can palpate these regions. If a patient ever complains of any pain, then you would say, well, it was the right lower quadrant that they had pain. And you can see how they are abbreviated here. RUQ, right upper quadrant. LUQ, left upper quadrant. RLQ, right lower quadrant. And LQ, left lower quadrant. Again, nurses like to document with abbreviations. It increases speed of documentation, uses room when we're documenting. So do know those abbreviations. Let's look at homeostasis. I'll give you a quick little break and we'll come back.